Show a video. It's YouTube after all, and it highlights a little bit about where YouTube came from.
When we first started, it was just trying to share these clips with one another.
We saw the power of simplifying a process and giving everyone a solution.
Hi YouTube, we just want to say thank you. Today we have some exciting news for you. We've been acquired by Google.
Hello?
Johnny, that really hurt.
I'm Clara, I'm 91 years old.
This is the CNN YouTube debate.
Yes, we can.
One of the features of growing old is heightened awareness of change.
Is this real life?
Oh my God, you're walking.
We can't handle this.
Justin Bieber's getting ready to go down.
People who are taking these pictures are literally risking their lives to do what they're doing, and YouTube gives them a venue.
Your device is on. Can you tell?
All right. For those of you that didn't know what YouTube is, that's what YouTube is. All right. So I said I was going to talk a little bit about lessons. What I did is I picked 4 lessons that come out of some of the interesting YouTube stories that I've had a chance to witness over the years. I've been at YouTube now a little over 4 years, and as you can probably tell from the videos, we get a chance to see a lot of different interesting challenges and opportunities, and hopefully some of these are going to be meaningful for you as well. So with that, I'll jump in. Yes, this slide? Looks like I did. All right, lesson number 1. So lesson number 1 is bet on tailwinds. And what I'll talk a little bit about the tailwind behind YouTube. But what I mean by this is that every time you think about a business or an opportunity or product, you can sort of think about them in 2 camps. There's businesses that have headwinds and businesses that have tailwinds. Businesses that have tailwinds have some natural momentum, something happening in the ecosystem that propels them forward. And businesses that have headwinds have the opposite. They have something holding them back. And I think it's interesting to think about what the tailwind is behind any business that you're working on and any opportunity you're looking at. I'll tell you a little bit about YouTube's tailwinds, starting with a little bit about television. So if you think back to 1988, the #1 show on television was a show called The Cosby Show. I know many of you here have never seen The Cosby Show, but it's a very popular show back in 1988. The average American household at the time got only 26 channels of television. This show got a 25-point rating and had about a 50% household share. Household share means that it's a percentage of the TVs on at a given time that are watching that show. So it meant if you were at home on a Thursday night at 8 o'clock and your television was on, there was a better than average chance you were watching The Cosby Show. Now, if you fast forward 10 years, anybody know what the #1 show was in 1998? Go ahead. Very good. That's very good. Yes, number one show. That was not the likely respondent in the room. The number one show in 1998 was Seinfeld. Number of channels on television had doubled. Seinfeld got roughly the same ratings that Cosby did back in 1988. How about 2008? Anybody know? Go ahead. Nope. Not The Simpsons. No, Friends was done by then. The 2008 number one show was American Idol. Super popular show. All right, great. All right, the 2008 number one show on television was American Idol. Got roughly half the ratings that Seinfeld and Cosby did before it. And as a sort of fun part of the story, and a chance to speak with some of the NBC executives that were charged with creating Seinfeld, and one of the stories they tell is that the first few episodes of Seinfeld were really terrible, and the audience really didn't like it very much. Those first few episodes of Seinfeld actually did better than American Idol did in 2008. So the bar for television has totally changed over those years. And sort of an obvious thing to ask is, did people stop watching television? And that's not what happened. In fact, if you go look at the number of hours a day of television that the average American watches, it's gone up every single year for the last 30 years. It's over 5 hours a day now. But what was happening was something much, much larger. What was happening was the generation of cable networks. This is a chart I asked my team to pull that just plots all the different cable networks ordered by their audience share. And the interesting data you can see here is if you look at the networks with less than 1% of viewership, they now account for about 50% of overall time spent on television. And in fact, if you look at the ones with less than 0.5%, it's about 30% of viewership. Anyone know why 0.5% is a magic number? Anyone close to the TV industry? All right, so 0.5%, there's a company called Nielsen that rates television channels. Nielsen doesn't measure any channel that reaches less than 0.5% of viewers. So that means about 30% of television today is unrated. So this is a pretty enormous transition. It happened over the course of about 20 years, where we went from having a handful of broadcast networks to having hundreds of cable networks. And the tailwind that's really happening behind YouTube is that history is repeating itself. And while it took about 30 years to go from having a handful of broadcast networks to having a few hundred cable networks, what we're seeing now is very quickly over the span of just a few years, we're going from having hundreds of cable networks to having millions of channels on the internet. This is sort of a very interesting trend and sort of happening in some ways with or without YouTube. This is something that as technology develops, it naturally happens. And it changes everything about an ecosystem. If you think back to, if you go back to the 1980s and you read some of the press articles, you'll see press about how people thought Ted Turner was crazy. People thought Ted Turner was busy at the time creating this channel called CNN. And people thought this was absolutely insane to have 24 hours a day of news. An hour a day of news seems like plenty for just about anybody. And yet, CNN is now one of the most popular networks, and now there's many other 24-hour-a-day news networks as well. So we see the same thing happening online as well. I thought I would take an example to tell you a little bit about. And I'm guessing with this audience that you probably know who this guy is. Does everybody know Sal? So this, for those of you that don't know, the small site here, his name is Sal Khan. And I wanted to tell his story with this sort of, with this lens, but he's on the cover of Forbes with this issue, so it's a pretty recent picture of him. I'll tell the story of Khan Academy from my perspective. So Sal and I actually went to college together, and we both went to MIT. And when we left college, we went sort of separate directions. He went down the finance route, I went down the technology route. He joined a hedge fund. We stayed in touch, and a few years back when I moved back to the Bay Area, we started getting our families together. We both happened to marry our college sweethearts, so we're both married to MIT women, they're both doctors, so there's a lot in common between the families. And so 2008, him and his wife were over for dinner, and I happened to mention to him that I had just taken a job at YouTube. And so he told me, well, you know, I've actually been posting some videos to YouTube. I've got this cousin down in Louisiana, and she's having trouble with her math, so I've been tutoring her using YouTube. And I said, well, thank you very much for using our product. You've joined millions of other people, but that's very nice of you. And we sort of left it at that. And the next day, went to work, and I decided to look up his channel and pull up some stats. So this is 2008. This was a time when MIT and Stanford had decided to post all of their lectures onto YouTube. They were videotaping them and putting them all on YouTube, including like all of my professors. And I looked at his stats, and at the time, in 2008, Sal was already getting more viewership than MIT and Stanford combined, which is a pretty amazing feat if you think about back in 2008. So I called him up and said, do you realize, this is what where your viewership is? We got him signed up for the YouTube Partner Program. At the time, the only way you could make money on YouTube is being part of this YouTube Partner Program. So we started running ads on his content. We started sending him a check every month. So if you fast forward a few months, him and his wife are over again. This time, his wife and my wife were actually both pregnant at the same time, having a nice dinner. And Sal mentions to me that he's been looking at his YouTube stats, and thank you very much for sending him the checks. But he looks at the revenue number and he extrapolates out. He's a mathematician, so he extrapolates out. And he says, in the next few months, I'm going to actually cross being able to pay my rent with this revenue. And if I look a little bit further out, I think I'm going to be able to cover my hedge fund salary. And he looked at me and he said, do you think this is going to continue? Do you think it's going to, all this growth is going to keep going? And his wife, Emma, looked at me and sort of gave me this evil stare. Like I said, they're pregnant at the time, and the right answer from her perspective was, please tell him to keep his job. But thankfully, I told him not to, and I said, I think this is going to continue, and this is one of those tailwinds that I think is just getting started. And I think the rest is sort of history. He quit. He now runs Khan Academy full time, raised tens of millions of dollars. To put it in perspective of the stats I was talking about with television, he gets about 8 million viewers, 8 million regular viewers, which if you compare him to PBS averages between 1 and 2 million viewers. So I think it's easy to say now that Sal is the single biggest educator on the planet. And the lesson I think that is important to take away here is to bet on tailwinds, that in every opportunity that sits in front of you, you can choose the things that are naturally growing, and you'll find that tailwinds accelerate everything you do, they amplify everything you do, they cover a lot of mistakes, and they make everything a lot more exciting. One that's very relevant here, and I think a lot of people don't realize this, but Jeff Bezos started Amazon before Netscape released their first browser. And for those of you that remember that time, this was back in the 90s, and the only way that people could access the internet was this browser called Mosaic, and it was basically only used by students and professors at universities. And Jeff Bezos looked at it and said, boy, I think people are going to buy books online. I don't think it's just going to be people in the universities. I'm going to bet on this tailwind and really follow it through, and we can see what's happened with Amazon since then. So that's lesson number one, bet on tailwinds. So number two, the U generation. So I think you're part of a very interesting new generation. Time Magazine does Person of the Year every year, and in 2006 they picked you. Sort of seems like an interesting choice. And no, it doesn't have anything to do with YouTube, even though, or it has a little bit to do with YouTube, but not only about YouTube, even though it looks like a YouTube player that they put on the cover there. But what they're really talking about here is that the world's changing very fast, that up till this point, most communication has been one way. People would go, and a small group of people decide what to broadcast to the whole world, and everybody else would sit back passively and consume it. And all of a sudden, in this generation, that's been flipped around. And every potential audience member is now also a potential producer. And that changes everything about how you think about services, how you think about the world. So one of the examples that gets used a lot, this was in the video I showed at the beginning, is this one. How many of you guys have seen this video? Okay, so those of you that haven't, that's your homework for tonight. Go watch it with my finger. It's now one of the most popular videos of all time on YouTube. Video of these two British brothers teasing each other. It's very cute, but it's sort of a classic home video. They posted to YouTube, not expecting much to happen. And now 500 million views later, or almost 500 million views later, they've made over $500,000 from this video, putting their kids through college. They have a foundation, they've created a show, and so on. And this was sort of an interesting example of a new form of media. There's many Hollywood movies that never make $1 million, and there's certainly many of them that never reach 500 million views. And this was really just a home video. And if you think about this, it's not just about home videos, it's actually changing much larger industries as well. And so I want to talk a little bit about music. So these are three very popular music artists today. So Justin Bieber, the second one over there is Carly Rae Jepsen, and the third one is a fellow named Psy from South Korea, who has released that video, Gangnam Style. Anybody know, there's three things these guys have in common. Anybody know what they are? Go ahead, number one.
Singers.
Okay, that's true. more than three, go ahead.
They all started out on YouTube?
They all started out on YouTube, that's true. They all got their break on YouTube.
They all use microphones.
They all use microphones, you guys know?
Same agent?
They all have the same agent, the guy named Scooter Braun. And the third one I'll skip ahead is that all three of them have a video in the top 20 of all-time YouTube views. So those are sort of interesting facts, and I thought I'd tell a little bit about their stories. So Justin Bieber started in 2008, and this fellow that you mentioned, Scooter Braun, was his agent, was wandering through YouTube and happened upon the videos from this 13-year-old kid, little 13-year-old kid, covering songs from popular artists. Thought it was amazing, called up his mom, and said, can I please, please, please bring your child to come meet some people in the music business? And his mom resisted, but finally said, as long as you come here and pick him up, you can fly him to where you like. And so he flew up there, picked him up, brought him down to meet Usher. Usher signed him to his label, and now Justin Bieber is arguably the biggest music artist in the world. Carly Rae Jepsen, the next one over, her story was she's actually also in Canada, and sort of a mediocre star there. And she posted this song, Call Me Maybe. Scooter heard the song, called up Justin Bieber, and said, I think this woman's amazing. Why don't we try to help her out? So Justin Bieber got together with some of his friends and his girlfriend, posted a cover to the Call Me Maybe song. That video not only took off, but her video took off, and now she's one of the biggest stars out there. And the third one there is Gangnam Style, and this one sort of got its own start. He posted this video in South Korea. He's been a star in South Korea for some time, but for some reason this one broke out and got a worldwide audience. Scooter called him up, signed him to his label, and got him on all the right talk shows and so on. And this one actually was surprisingly good. If you go look at the number of views per day for each of their first hits, the blue and red there are Bieber and Carly Rae's first videos, and the yellow one there is Gangnam Style, and actually that hasn't really stopped since, so I think that will quickly become the most watched video on YouTube. So these are three artists that really embraced this idea that this was a generation of you, that anybody could be a star. And if you just think about the music industry in particular, this is a pretty enormous change. I mean, if you're a musician, or if you were a musician just a few years back, the recipe was sort of simple. If you're a musician, you get yourself a demo tape, you move to Los Angeles, and you go find a bar or club where you can go play, and you hope that someone from the music industry is there to listen to you. And now all of a sudden, that's not how it works anymore. I was at a conference a few months back with Scooter Braun, who's helped all of these artists. And one of the things Scooter mentioned to me is that the music labels all used to have this department. They called it the AR department, the Artist Relations Department. And those people's jobs was to go to each of these different bars and clubs and try to find new artists. Those departments don't exist anymore. And all of a sudden, all those people have been replaced by people at the labels that sit and watch YouTube. And they watch for what has millions and millions of views, and they go try to sign them up. And what this means is the game has totally changed. Now, the right to be a popular musician is no longer dictated by some choke point in Los Angeles. The way you become a musician is you show your art to the world, to 800 million people who come regularly and help vote up whatever is going to be popular, and then you go find each of those music labels. And I think that's a pretty big change for the industry as a whole. And I think it's interesting instruction for some of you, or inspiration hopefully for some of you, in two potential ways. One is you can broadcast yourself. You can go home tonight and you can start a blog or a blog, and you can be the most popular musician in the world, or the educator in the world, the journalist in the world, and you don't need permission from anybody. And that's a pretty enormous change. And the other way I would think about it is, as each of you think about building your future products and each of your services, you need to design for a world where you're not publishing products out to a customer base, but those people are also publishing back to you. And I think that changes fundamentally how you think about businesses and opportunities for yourself and for your products. All right, so that's number two. All right, number three, think global. And another way of phrasing this one is the world is flat. So I thought I'd start with a few statistics here that I think are a little bit fun. So this is a map of where YouTube is launched, or it's a custom version launched. We have 47 countries around the world with a custom version of YouTube, built just for the language of that country, just for the content and preferences of that country. The green countries on this map cover about 80% of the world's internet population, And we're working very hard to get that to 100%. But it means that we get a sort of an interesting perspective on how the world is connected and the global nature of our world. And so if you look at this, every day about 150 human lives are spent on YouTube. Of those, yeah, I know it's an amazing statistic, of those about 18 are US viewers watching US content. Another 42 are people outside the United States watching content uploaded by people in their same country. And those of you doing the math means that means there are now 90 of those 150 people that are watching content from creators outside of their own country. Now this is an enormous change. When you think about television, you think about newspapers, you think about magazines, predominantly you consume what's created in your country, and occasionally you jump out and you see the French foreign film, or you see the Bollywood movie, or whatever it might be. But all of a sudden we have this medium where not only can you see things from other countries, that's predominantly what people do, is that they're seeing things created from other countries. I think this has an enormous impact. Of course, it meant that someone like Psy could bring Korean pop to the United States or to the rest of the world. But it also can have enormous impacts across the world. And so I thought I would talk about one of the interesting examples. Anyone know who Nita is? No one? Okay. So Nita Sultan, I'll tell the full story then. So Nita Sultan was a woman in Iran, and her story takes place in 2009, June 20th, 2009. So she was a 26-year-old musician living in Iran. And at the time, they had just had an election for the Iranian president. And Ahmadinejad had just been re-elected president. And the entire population was convinced that the election was rigged. There's a whole bunch of signs that said that he didn't actually win. And so they all decided to take to the streets. So hundreds of thousands of Iranians take to the streets and protest of this election, including Nita. What they didn't know is that the Iranian government had a militia group that was charged with breaking up these protests. And so they came out and they gently tried to force people to stop, and eventually not so gently. One of them had a gun and shot Nita in the chest. She died right there on the street. Now, I think, I know what most people think when they hear the story is, well, it seems like it must happen every day. But there was something a little bit different about Nita's story. So first off, the Iranian government had kicked all the journalists out of the country. They had decided that, this had happened just over the course of the preceding month, they had decided that it was too much of a disruption, so they kicked everybody out of the country and said that CNN and so on aren't allowed to broadcast what's happening in our country. So there was no news coming from Iran. But what happened in this case was somebody standing nearby took a video, and that's a little screenshot on the left from the video, of Nita dying. And it's a really sad video watching all these people around try to figure out how to save her life. This video not only was popular in Iran, but got spread up to millions of people around the world and became a rallying cry for something that became called the Arab Spring. Millions of people used Nita as a point of identification. So they said, if it can happen to her, it can happen to me. And created a set of revolutions that spanned all of the Middle East. So this is a map actually from Wikipedia, just mapping out what happened in the Arab Spring. Now you can't read most of that, but every one of those colors is a different type of activity that happened in all of those different countries. The black ones are ones where governments were overthrown. And I think it's important to think about the fact that if it weren't for this global nature of all of our platforms, this story might never have made it outside of Iran and might never have inspired all of these people to rise up against their governments. So I think that's a really, really important thing to think about as you plan your own careers and your own futures, is how do you think global? And there's a lot of different things I think you can do. I think you can learn a language, I think you can travel, but a lot of it is also just understanding the cultures around you. It's understanding your neighbor might have a different culture that you can learn from as well. And I think it's an important thing to think about, that is, as much as these walls are coming down between all these different countries, I think in just a few years they'll be largely erased. And that's an important context for anything you might do. So another thing to think about this, what happened in the Middle East and about the Arab Spring, was because there were no journalists, the ways that people communicated were tools like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and so on. And all of those tools share a couple characteristics. So one characteristic I talked about, they're all products that have embraced the fact that this generation of you, and that the producers and the consumers of their services are one and the same. But all three services also share another characteristic in that they are all ad-supported, which means that they are free to access for the consumer, and advertisers are paying for all of this content to be spread around the world. So the fourth story I wanted to talk about is about advertising. And the lesson, I think, in this story is to trust your instincts, but I'll come back to that in a second. How many of you have seen an ad that looks like this on YouTube? The big skip button on it. All the kids. Good. So, so this is a format we call TrueView. Specifically, this is called TrueView Hint Stream. And I thought I'd tell a little bit of a story of where this ad format came from and what I think it might mean for some of you. So the story begins in Super Bowl 2008. Those of you that are football fans may remember this well. The New England Patriots were undefeated walking into the Super Bowl. If they had won, they would have been the first undefeated team since the 70s. But the New York Giants managed to squeak out this very unlikely win. But the interesting part of the story was that we had a number of people over to our house to watch this game. And I noticed that as they were watching the game, people were very interested in the game, but they also asked me to keep rewinding the game to watch the commercials. And that was sort of interesting. What is it about the Super Bowl that makes it that people think of the commercials as being as interesting as the rest of the content is? If you fast forward a year, I was put in charge of running monetization at YouTube, and it turned out this was more true than just advertising on the Super Bowl. In fact, if you go to YouTube and you search for the word commercial, you'll see pages and pages and pages of results of ads that have tens of millions of views. And I think it's easy to take this for granted today, but I'd encourage everybody to think about the time when this wasn't true. Just a few years back, we would have thought of ads as being what I call the broccoli of television, the thing you have to eat in order to watch the rest of your show. And all of a sudden, these are all ads that people are choosing to watch instead of watching content. And this is a lot of how we think about advertising. So we launched a product that sort of embraced this called Promoted Video. And you can see it along the right-hand side of the search results here, and actually the top two results at the top there. And the idea behind this format was really simple. It works a lot like search ads do on Google.com. Advertisers bid for placement, and we take their bid, we multiply it by how relevant they are to that particular query, and we decide where to place them on the right-hand side of the page. If it's good enough, up at the top of the search results. There's one big difference from Google search ads, and that is that Google search ads are charged on a cost per click basis. You pay every time somebody clicks and visits your website, whereas all of these are charged on a cost per view basis, meaning you pay every time someone chooses to view your ad. So a couple interesting things happened. So first off, thousands of advertisers jumped in. This was one of the fastest ad format ramps that we'd ever seen, and advertisers jumped in, viewers clicked on the ads, and all the right things happened. But the second interesting thing that happened was the bids that people were making in this format. So just to give you some background on how to think about bidding here, it's an auction system, which means that we don't set prices. So advertisers can come in and bid whatever they like. Now, the bids in these auctions were clearing generally between 10 and 40 cents per view. To give you some context on this, the average television ad is bought on a per thousand basis. It's called a CPM. You pay per thousand impressions. It generally costs somewhere between $5 and $10 per thousand impressions, which means something like a penny per view. So what that means is that these advertisers were taking their ads, they're putting up on YouTube, and they were offering to pay roughly 10 to 40 times what they were paying on television for the exact same views. And for a while, this baffled us. Why would advertisers choose to pay more for this experience? And so we had this interesting set of interviews with advertisers, and one of the agencies down in LA gave me a way of thinking about it that I think was very impactful. They said when you buy an ad on television, you need to show your ad to people 5, 10, 15, 20 times for them to remember your ad. And that's because you never know when they're actually watching. They might be skipping past your ad, they might be in the bathroom, they might just not be paying attention. But these are all cases where users are choosing to watch your ad. And so chances are high that they now know what your car is about or what your movie's about or so on. And so I don't need to pay, I don't need to show it to them over and over and over again. So this was really interesting. We now had two important insights. We knew that advertisers can now create ads that users want to watch. And if users choose to watch the ads, then it's much more valuable to the advertiser. So we took those two ideas and combined them together and created this format we call TrueView InStream. That's what I was showing at the beginning. And the way this works is fairly simple. We pick an ad to show you. We show it as a pre-roll. And we put a big skip button on the ad. If you skip the ad, then the advertiser doesn't pay. But if you don't skip the ad and you watch it till the end, then the advertiser pays on a cost per view basis. And the ads work wonderfully. We're now up to about 75% of the in-stream ads on YouTube are now skippable. But probably one of the most amazing stats is how much money it produces. And the basic idea here is that many, many people skip ads, but we want to make it so valuable when you don't skip ads that it'll make up for all the cases when you do. One of the metrics we use for this is the revenue per hour of viewership. Cable television monetizes at about 20 cents per hour. Per hour you're watching cable television, they're making about 20 cents on the ads. Primetime broadcast television is about 40 cents. And about a year ago, we crossed such that TrueView in-stream ads are now generating more revenue per hour than cable television, and will soon cross broadcast television probably sometime next year. So that's all very interesting, format's working well, but again, I think it's important to think about the big picture about what's happening in advertising. You know, for years, the way you made more money on television was by showing people more and more ads. If you think back to the 60s and 70s, most shows had a single advertiser. The soap operas were called soap operas because one soap company offered to sponsor the whole soap opera. And then over years, the content creators added more and more advertising, and now, in an average 30-minute show, there are 18 messages from sponsors. And the philosophy we're working on here with TrueView is that we think we can show viewers much fewer ads, but give advertisers much more impact for every time their ad is seen, and thereby generate much more money for content creators as well. So I think it's a very interesting thing we're working on, but the lesson I wanted to leave you with is to trust your instincts. And the reason for this is I skipped an important part of the story. So we had this event at the Super Bowl with all these people at our place asking us to go back and rewind the ads, and I said a year later I ended up running monetization for YouTube. Now, what happened there was somewhat interesting. I had never bought or sold an ad in my life. In fact, I knew nothing about advertising. I didn't know what a CPM was. I didn't know how ads were created. I didn't know how the dynamics work, and so on. And yet, as I watched these people ask me to rewind these ads, I thought maybe this could be different. Maybe we could create a way for ads to feel more like the Super Bowl every day. I wrote a little position paper on it. I happened to have a friend who was running product management at Google at the time, and I sent it to him. And I said, look, I'm not in this space. I was at the time working in the database space. But maybe, I like television. Maybe you guys can do something about this and try and fix advertising. And thankfully, he asked me to go take a shot and do it myself. But the important lesson I learned from this, and I think is an important lesson for all of you, is that whenever you have a new idea and you observe something that might feel a little bit like it could be a little bit better, your first instinct is going to be, well, I bet somebody else already thought of it, and chances are probably high that somebody did think of it. And your second instinct is going to be, well, somebody else is probably better suited to do it than me. And I think if there was one lesson I wanted to leave you, I think the fourth one is probably the most important, is that your instincts are probably better than you think. And chances are high that the thing you think should be fixed isn't already being fixed, and you should jump in and try. So those are the four things I took away from some of these lessons. When faced with choices, I think it's important to pick the ones where the world is behind you, bet on those tailwinds. I think it's important to recognize the environment you're in, one where every producer is a consumer and you live in a generation of you, and where the lines between our countries and our cultures are racing, and think about the global nature of everything you do. And then finally, I think it's important to be trustful of your instincts and do things that might seem obvious to you, may not be as obvious to the rest of the world as you think. And with that, I'll take some questions. Go ahead.
So, have you seen a lot of ads on YouTube from these election campaign people?
That's a good question. So the question was, have we seen a lot of ads from the election? Yes, we have. And so it's sort of an interesting thing to think about. So the way the ads work, or the way these TrueView ads work, is you pay on a cost per view basis, which means that you sort of pay closer to your true value. And one of the stories I like to tell is that the cost per views of these ads can range pretty widely. So if you think about television, I said the average ad is about $10 per 1,000 impressions. And the range for that is, you could pay 30 or 40 bucks to be in the Super Bowl. You might pay $2 to be, or $5 to be in overnight television, but you're kind of within that kind of range. On YouTube, those ranges are more like 100x. And so not only do we see a lot of political ads on the platform, the more unpopular you are as a politician, and the more unpopular your message is, the more you're probably paying. And so we see, in some cases, where a movie studio might be paying 1 or 2 cents per view. There was a candidate, I won't say which one it was, in California, that was paying well over $7 a view, and ultimately wasn't re-elected. Or wasn't elected, sorry, but it was the first election. So we've seen a lot of those. I think it's an obvious product for politicians. It's the sort of value proposition makes plenty of sense. You can target down to exactly what your geography is, and I think the good politicians are finding a way to build ads that people actually want to see, and using it to their advantage. Go ahead.
I am a very brand new beginner to study about technology. So please tell me a brief overview about what is YouTube and why you come up with that name. And I'm seeing on the App Store like Tube and iTube and whatever.
Sure. So what is YouTube? It's a very fundamental question. But YouTube is most simply defined as a video distribution platform, which means you can upload your video to it and people can watch it from around the world. The name YouTube really came from what I was referring to as a sort of generation of you, and the original motto of the company was broadcast yourself. So it's an opportunity for you to put yourself in television. As for all the copycats that have names like ours, we stomp them out as fast as we can, and the ones we can't are probably left in the App Store for you to try. Go ahead.
What's that one thing that makes you get up every morning and go to work?
The question was, what's the one thing that makes you get up every morning and go to work? I actually think the story I told about Sal is probably high on the list. I think the chance to build a platform that lets someone like that, show his work to the world, I think is pretty inspiring and something that can convince anybody to get up and go. I think the stories from the Arab world, I think, are also inspiring. But I think working on things that have global impact, that can really impact many people at once, and produce that sort of leverage, I think is a great inspiration to go to work. I also love my workplace, I love the people I work with. Google's a great place to work and so on, but those are probably some of the other reasons. But
what's your favorite video?
Oh man, my favorite video. It's hard to pick favorites, although I try to watch as many as I can. I like a lot of the music videos. I think the Gangnam Style video is pretty good, and I think they did a very nice job of it. But if I had to pick my favorite video, I'd probably pick a video of one of my daughters. And we actually won this little competition among the different product and engineering folks at YouTube, and for a while I was actually leading this competition. The competition is who can get the most views for their videos on YouTube, and no, we're not allowed to cheat. And for a while she was leading. If you go search for Annika orders, I'm now forgetting the title. I think it's called Cute Kid Annika or some such thing. For a while it was like number 4 if you search for Cute Kid on YouTube, but since it's dropped off, there's a lot of cute kids there now. Go ahead. How many videos are in YouTube? A few billion videos. We get for every minute of time, we get about 72 hours of content uploaded. Just to put that in perspective, over the course of about a month, we get more content uploaded to YouTube than has been produced by all of the different studios and cable networks in the United States over the course of the last 60 years. So there's a lot of content there, and it's growing really, really fast. Go ahead.
When I watch YouTube, there's some videos that are like a low skip time. We cost more than the skip time on the videos.
Yes, the question is, what about the videos that aren't, the ads that aren't skippable, how do they compare? So it depends. I'm really hopeful that by sometime next year I'll be able to get rid of all the ads that aren't skippable. But if we're showing them, they're probably producing more money than the ones that are skippable.
Where do you store all the videos?
Where do we store all the videos? So they're stored in data centers all around the world. Just a fun stat, YouTube now accounts for, depending on how you count it, about 20 to 30% of overall internet traffic. So that's pretty large. And one of the ways we do that is by taking all the videos and putting them as close to the people who are consuming them as possible. So we have thousands and thousands of places around the world where all these videos are distributed, just so that when you ask for the video, if you're sitting in Russia, we don't have to come all the way back to the United States to get a copy of the video. We'll get it right from somewhere in Russia.
What determines which particular ad will be shown for a video?
Yeah, so the question, what determines which ad will be shown for a video? So it's actually a very interesting problem, and the way I think about it is we're shifting the responsibilities of advertising. So the ultimate, usually on television, the responsibility of which ad shows where just happens because of who buys it, and they get to pick where they run. In our case, if we show the wrong ad to the viewer and they skip it, then we don't make any money, and neither does the content creator. So we have an incentive to pick the right ad for that particular user, for that particular video, and for that particular context, depending on which device you're on or where you are in your session and so on. So the heart of that algorithm is something that predicts view-through rates. So just like CPC ads have something they call click-through rates, how often people click on an ad. These TrueView ads have something we call view-through rates, what percentage of the time will people view the ad. And so the whole system is a machine learning system, which means that it takes a set of inputs and trains over lots and lots of data and tries to produce the best possible answer to predict the view-through rate for this particular ad. And at the moment it does pretty well. We tend to get the view-through rates right within sort of 1%, which means we're generally doing a pretty good job of knowing the chances that you're going to skip that ad or not. I'll put it over there.
So how many people apply for the partnership program?
How many people apply for the partnership program? We have at this point, I think we've crossed having about 1 million partners. And now it's not an application process, so as you upload videos to YouTube, you can now just check the button and say, I want to monetize my video. I think it's great. Just to put that in perspective, 1 million people are getting checks from YouTube every month. That's actually larger than the total number of people employed in Hollywood. And so that's, I think it's quite a good sign for all the different places that content creators are coming. Go ahead.
On many school servers, or Wi-Fi, there's like a content filter that blocks YouTube unless you use HTTPS. But what is YouTube going to do about this? Are they just going to sit back and let that happen, or are they going to
So the question is, how come all these schools block YouTube? My plan is to go give talks to students all over the country and convince you to go write your school boards and tell them that they shouldn't be blocking YouTube. It's a real problem. We launched something a few months back for a subset of YouTube we call YouTube EDU, that you can actually ask your school administrator, and I don't know if your school in particular blocks YouTube or not, but you can ask your school administrator and tell them if you don't want to unblock all of YouTube, you can actually unblock just YouTube EDU, which is all the content from all these different universities and from Khan Academy and so on. But I do think that's an important challenge and something we're working on, but at the end of the day, every school board makes its own decisions. Okay.
Regarding the monetization of YouTube, 2 questions. One, what's the difference between the partnership now versus the one in the past? And 2, can you get more than 1 check from the same video? Because when you start off, the views might get bigger and bigger. So do you get like another check the next month, or how does that work?
Okay, so the first question was what's the difference in the partnership program as it used to be and now? The big difference is that there is no application process anymore. Anybody can now click the button to monetize, but beyond that, it's roughly the same as it was. In terms of the checks, the way the checks work, just to explain this, we just pay a share of the revenue made on your video. So if nobody watches your video and no ads are shown, then you don't get a check. But every month we just count up how many times your video was watched, how many ads were shown, how much they paid, and we write a check that's basically the majority of the money from all of those ads go directly back to the content creator. Over here.
In terms of harmful videos out there in the flagging system, since the amount of videos uploaded now is like triple from 2009, have you seen an increase in flagging and the amount of videos coming down compared to 2009?
The question is, have we seen an increase in flagging since the upload volume has grown so much? I think the flagging rates have stayed relatively constant, which is kind of interesting given the number of uploads are up so much. Although flagging rates correlate generally more with views than they do with uploads, because videos that nobody watches, nobody bothers flagging. But it is sort of an interesting system as you think about how, I talked a lot about this generation of view and how you have to build platforms that assume that people can be creators. It also creates a big burden on us because we can have content uploaded to our platform that we might not want to be on our platform. And when you have 72 hours of content uploaded every minute, you have no hope of watching it all and being able to tell. And so we rely largely, we have some set of automated filters, but we rely largely on the community to come tell us when something is inappropriate. And I think it actually does an amazingly good job. And so far we haven't had an issue keeping up.
So you don't have any technology that monitors what is appropriate or not inappropriate? So,
question, do we have technology that monitors what's appropriate or inappropriate? We have technology that it uses a signal. So, for example, for adult content or for pornography, there's a number of signals you can have. In fact, we actually have this thing that is we can tell what percentage of a video is skin. Sort of an interesting piece of technology. And so we use those as signals. We use the user flagging as signals as well. But before we take anything down, we'll pull all those together, and then somebody does watch the video before we take it down.
So what do you envision as the future uses,
where do we envision YouTube going? So I think that the simplest definition I can give to people is that we hope that YouTube is the platform for the post-cable generation of channels. I talked a little bit about that in the beginning, that we think that there's a new generation of content creators and of channels that really don't have a home on cable. As cable ran out of shelf space, you can't really go over 400 channels on your cable broadcasters. The need for a new place to go broadcast content has come upon us, and we think YouTube is a great host for those. So we do everything we can to be the best possible host to make sure that those content creators have the easiest time getting their content out to their audiences, that viewers can find it, and that they can make the most money possible when that's their goal. Go back there. Sure.
Like I see some game websites that have like a YouTube video walkthroughs or something. Like, do they have to pay? They have to pay YouTube in order to get that video onto their gaming website or anything?
Yeah. So the question is, do sites that embed gaming walkthroughs, and I guess I could answer it more generally for sites that embed videos, they pay for access to the video? The answer is no. YouTube embeds are free to the hoster. All of the revenue goes back to the content creator, which is one of the important principles we had in designing YouTube. And if you look back at when YouTube was created in 2005, 2006, it was one of the characteristics that probably most distinguished YouTube was this ability for content to be embedded all over the internet. Most video properties try to lock content into their property, and our view was that viewers should be able to find content wherever they might want to. For gaming in particular, a lot of people don't know this, but gaming behind music is the second most popular vertical on YouTube. It's actually surprisingly popular. And I think of gaming walkthroughs as one of those examples of the type of content that never really had a home on cable. And was really a missed opportunity for them. If you go look at the size of some of these gaming networks, they're much, much larger than many of the cable networks. But the nature of gaming makes it very hard to concatenate this into a single channel. I think I'm almost over time, so why don't I take one more question? And
so is there any plan to provide application platform through APIs on YouTube so that people can write new applications and monetize?
Yeah, so the question is, what's the plan for YouTube APIs? There actually is a pretty robust set of YouTube APIs today. And so people have built very interesting services on top of YouTube. Actually, the embed platform is one of the most commonly used forms of API, and people build many interesting services on top of YouTube. Sometimes video services, sometimes services that really aren't about video, but embed video. Actually, Khan Academy is a good example. Not only is Khan Academy a popular channel on YouTube, but their primary application is a learning system that embeds the YouTube videos inside of their application as well. But we're constantly evolving those APIs to give people even more access to these. All right, I'm happy to stick around and answer more questions, but thank you very much for taking the time to listen.